So good evening, everybody. Everybody have a good day today? Everybody had fun out there? I got in a little late, so I didn't get out to participate. But thank you for coming to our opening presentation. I know it's always hard to kick this thing off, but Frank and I are here. If I had to summarize this presentation, it would be that 20-so years ago when Frank and I first met each other, we used to complain a lot about our lot in life and how miserable our jobs were. And then we decided, we meaning Frank, decided to do something about it. So this is a presentation about launching high-performance teams, where we're going to get into a little bit more in detail of the research that went behind what we're presenting tonight. Done at New York University, Tandon School of Engineering. As you said, John Shea, just to tell you a little bit about the Department of Education, New York City. If you are not aware, New York City is the largest school system in America, 1,350 buildings, 130 million square feet, 1.1 million students. Put that in a different perspective, 1 in 300 Americans is currently enrolled in the New York City school system. So we have a lot of stuff that keeps us busy. Frank, say hello, Frank.
Hey, how are you doing? I assume that's working, yes?
All right, say a little bit about yourself.
All right, so I did this crazy thing about 7 or 8 years ago. I decided after a bit of a career in construction, about 35 years, I'm a licensed architect in New York. I decided to go back for my doctorate, okay? Craziest thing you could ever think of doing, okay, in your mid-50s. You talk about a life-changing experience. But we ended up at the NYU, where I also teach, and best thing I actually had done, okay? So we had this idea 20 years ago that there had to be a better way in New York State to perform public works construction, all right? We did enough complaining about it, that's for sure. So I decided to do something about it, and that's exactly what I went back to do, to research design, bid, build in the public sector in New York State, did a dissertation on it, and some of the results of that research and dissertation we're going to show you tonight.
Here's a copyright slide. Past performance is no indication of future results, et cetera, et cetera. Learning objectives. So if anybody's getting credits for this, these are some of the things that we're going to talk about. Implementing team alignment strategies, and we're going to talk about 2 what I think are very interesting case studies. The interdependent relationships and how that creates a high-performance team. Understanding the alignment strategies that get those relationships to the high-performance team, and the application of the tools that were developed from the research and the assessment techniques to put a framework around it so that you actually have something to back it up when you need to sell this to the folks that pay the bills. The outline, we're going to talk a little bit about project delivery methods in general. In particular, we come from the New York State world. It's a very rigid construction delivery process that we have to deal with design, bid, build, which is what we pushed us to look at this and how we can do this in a different way and actually make it more successful. And those are the case studies. And we're going to do a little live poll, which I think you'll find fun. Get it? Doing it right? Okay, there we go. Okay. Blah, blah, blah. Research on Tandon School of Engineering and the conceptual framework for an ideal state and the best value outcome. And what we're really talking about here is that every project has varying degrees of success, so what we're trying to do is create the best value outcome and the best success with regardless of the project delivery method that you are dealing with. And it moves beyond the mechanism to guarantee performance. The contract is not the end-all and be-all with what we're talking about.
And then, you know, just a comment with that, in public works in New York State, okay, because design, bid, build being the traditional method that's mandated, okay, by the state of New York. Those contracts can be 2 feet thick, right? So if you decided to actually read it, okay, you would never do any work, right? Right? True?
And that happens.
Okay, so.
So project delivery in general, you've got the triangle, we all know this stuff, quick, cheap, and good. You usually can't get all 3 at the same time. This research and the work that we've done is aiming to try to improve on that and try to get where we want to be. These are the different kinds of methods that I'm sure you're familiar with, starting with design, bid, build, and then as you go down the list, you get more and more options, more and more flexibility, a little bit more ability to control your environment, but in the end, you're still dealing with a set of documents and a set of construction. Go ahead.
Yeah, go on to the next slide. Yeah, so in New York State, we're kind of like the last of the dinosaurs, all right? So we're not allowed to do design, build, or construction management at risk, okay? Legislation, the legislature will actually issue a one-off type of deal. Right now, a couple of projects, Tappan Zee Bridge is design build, LaGuardia Airport is a P3, okay? But those are the exceptions and not the rule. 95%.
And neither one of those is a school, if you hadn't noticed.
Yeah. 95% of the public works constructing in the state of New York is design, bid, build, low seal bid.
So, private sector features, what I'm sure we all dream about going to bed at night. What do you get? You get contractual freedom. You can choose whoever you want. You can choose whatever procurement system you want. You're not limited to what the state law says. Desired level of team integration. You want people to get together and brainstorm before a project is just being conceived. You're allowed to do that. You get to choose the design and the construction team. You've got relationships with people. You're able to get them on board. Assign varying levels of risk. If you think that one person on the team is better at something than another, you're allowed to move that work towards them. Free to negotiate. You sit down, you get a proposal, you can work it out, you can change it, you can modify it, and you have the ability to shorten the delivery timeline. You can always pay more money to get it done faster. But this is what I'm sure everybody in this room deals with. Public sector features. Contracts have the lowest sealed bid. You don't know who your construction manager is, your general contractor, until you slice open the envelopes and see who's at the bottom of the list. Designer, you can have some flexibility in picking your designer, but again, there's a system and you can negotiate a little bit, but not so much. Most common project delivery methods, there is a statutory separation of the design and construction. It is by design. It is there for preventing fraud and abuse. But what that does is it takes away the human element and the ability to actually use your brains and your skills, what they're paying you for, to make a difference in the success of the project. Design bid, go ahead.
And one point to that, we always said, is the designer and the constructor, are they not equally important? Okay, in New York State, we treat the constructor the same as if we were procuring a case of paper. Okay, so that's a really difficult proposition.
And design, bid, build is the most common form, particularly in New York. I'm sure around the country you're dealing with very similar things. And one thing that it is very, very good at is maximizing the delivery timeline. You go to an architect and an engineering firm, you design the plans, and so you get everything done, all the drawings, all the plans, all the specs, and it is only then that you can put that out to the marketplace and start to get bids back, and then you go through that whole process. Everything is linear. There's no integration whatsoever. Lack of transparency. Like I said, you never know who you're getting until the envelopes get open. And the trade subcontractors, which are vitally important to this, even though you're only maybe dealing with one GC, or in New York State you've got 4 contracts under the Wix Law, but you don't have access to the people that are below them who are doing the work on the ground in your buildings that you'd love to be able to direct, but you don't have that option. So, what's the important part? Anybody see Sully, the movie, Sully? I liked it. And if you remember the movie Sully, it was primarily not about the crash. There was a little part of the movie, but it was about the FAA giving the pilots grief and criticizing them for not going back to the airport when they realized that their engines had shut down. And all of the computer models said that they could have made it back to the airport. And they said, that's great, but as you went through the hearings, they realized that one thing was missing from that assessment, which was the element of people. And when the people were involved in the cause, that delayed the timeline, and the only way that they would be successful in the end was the people had to solve the problem. Construction is the same thing. It is a people business. Regardless of the contracts, regardless of the statutory limitations, there are real people doing real work in real buildings.
And just an added comment, I can recall being a young superintendent, 35 years ago, and I remember my wife asked me, what is it that you do when a project goes bad? And I said, maybe 20% are technical issues, but 80% are people issues. And I'm sure we will probably all feel the same way in the room, okay? And when a project really goes south, more times than not, okay, it's about people decisions.
So what is the basis of all this? The basis of all this is we're not going to be able to change the state laws very easily. We're not going to be able to change our attorneys. We're not going to be able to change all that. But what we can do is figure out how we can work with the people better to make the projects more successful. Project delivery can be a difficult environment. Anybody go to work and you're doing a big project and everybody gets along and everybody's happy and there's no problems and nobody yells at each other? No, that never happens. And how you deal with that on the people basis is how you're going to succeed. Most people go to work, they want to do a good job. They don't get up in the morning and say, you know what, I just want to mail it in today. I'm not interested, I'm just going to show up and do my thing. Most people, especially in the construction and the operations business that I've seen, really do want to do a good job. So how can we leverage that? How can we use that to our advantage? What we found is that any project, and it doesn't have to be construction, this is something that translates into a wide variety of other projects and project delivery methods. The primary stakeholders want to do a good job, but they all come at something from a little bit of a different angle. They all have a parochial perspective. It's not necessarily a bad thing, but the people who are in charge at the top, which is all of you folks, really have to understand that, and we started to think about how it is that we can get all of those different perspectives aligned and have the team pulling in the direction that we needed them to go. And it's also important to remember project success, regardless of the project delivery method, is never guaranteed. If you have people that aren't doing the right thing, it doesn't matter. If you're using the most integrated project delivery method, you're not going to succeed. And this is kind of a graphic that shows you all of those different stakeholders circling around what we're trying to accomplish in getting the project to successful conclusion. So the research developed a process that created a best value alignment. How did we do that? Best value alignment, we used some case studies, and Frank's going to get into this in a little bit more detail in a minute. But basically, we looked at these projects and said, what is it that we did in these projects? And the two we're talking about, the Barry Tech project, which was one that we did together, which was where we met over 20 years ago when I worked for a small regional school district in New York State. It was a career and tech ed center that we had to keep in operation and do the construction with the building occupied, no swing space, and how did we get that done under the budget constraints that the board had given us? And then the US Tennis Center project, which Frank more recently did. Those were successful projects. What were the things that led to those projects being successful? Identify those factors, develop that into a hypothesis, examine those theories, analyze the data, which is very important, that we actually had to back this up with real data to support the research. So the theory is, what if every project that you do is considered mission critical, cannot fail? What does that mean? High-risk complex project. Painting classrooms is probably not a mission critical, cannot fail project. Building an addition, I would say, probably is. And in the school world that we all deal with, September 1st comes around, those doors better be open. We better have a certificate of occupancy. That's what we deal with. If we go to the superintendent and say, well, you know what, we really didn't get it done, it's got to be October, they're not going to be happy. We all wouldn't be sitting here at this point if we ever gave that kind of an answer. Or in the business world, it's the same thing. The US Tennis Center project that Frank's going to talk about. Hundreds of millions of dollars at stake. The US Open is coming to Flushing Meadow, middle of August. They better have a court to play tennis on. So the initial observation, what if every project is no option for failure? What are the things that we would do to put together that project delivery team? How would they integrate with each other? How would they engage? And what would that delivery process look like? How can we function as a high-performing team? The procurement system. Do we get people paid on time? Do we have supplies coming in when we need them? It's not just the general construction, the swinging of the hammers, but it's the procurement side of it as well. And what are the conditions? Primarily trust, but what are the conditions that we need to ensure a highly successful project outcome? So that ball and chain is all of the things that we just talked about that are getting in the way. We can't change them. but that doesn't mean that we can't work around them. How do we get rid of that ball and chain?
All right. So what we found, okay, high performance teams are directly correlated where organizational interests are aligned with project interests. I'll take it even one step further, okay, where everyone on that project team basically is putting project interests first, okay, ahead of their own personal interests. So John and I first met 20-something years ago, okay, Nassau BOCES on Long Island, Joseph M. Barry Career Center. This was a project in which was probably the most critical project to that school district at the time, all right? And we knew that we didn't have an option for failure, all right? And a little background information on that. I'm really having a hard time with this. Okay, all right. So public sector owner, John, why don't you just kind of describe where we were coming with this?
Sure. So this was, like I said, the largest regional school district in New York State. We had 17 buildings. I think my budget at the time was $15 million. I thought it was hot stuff. And now my budget's $1.4 billion and 1,350 buildings. But at the time, it was a board that was used to leasing space from local school districts that had started to divest themselves of those buildings in the late 1970s and early 1980s when demographics on Long Island, the baby boom was dying. There was a lot of cheap real estate. We were stuck with a whole bunch of triple net leases and buildings that we weren't maintaining because we didn't own them. The board did not want to fix this building, and they also didn't realize that they had the bonding capability to go out for a capital project. We worked all that stuff out. We worked with the dormitory authority, so we passed the bond issue. Then they said, well, now what do we do?
All right. So this is what we did. We knew we were stuck, okay, with design, bid, build in New York State, all right? But what we didn't want to do is just bring a general contractor in on board with the, and we have another thing in New York called Wix Law, all right? And Wix Law basically means there needs to be a general contractor at a minimum, along with a named HVAC contractor, plumbing, and electrical contractor. Problematic unto itself because who coordinates those four entities? That being said, okay, John and I were having a lot of discussions at the time and said, you know what, we got to do something different here. We need the ability to control these subs. You know, our experience is when a project was going bad at the time, it would take us a month just to figure out, you know, which trade and subcontractor wasn't getting it done and why weren't they getting it done. You finally, you know, you're digging through the weeds and you find out, you know, somebody hasn't been paid in 3 months, okay, and that's why they have no manpower and so forth. So within the framework that was provided for us, we needed to basically take that Wix Law and put it on steroids. And so what we did, which was totally unique to the entire industry at the time on Long Island, is that we went out with expanded multiple primes. So what you see up here is basically, I think there were about 14 prime contracts, and then above and beyond that were the BOCES contracts.
We were not popular people because the rap in New York State is Wix Law costs you 10 to 20% more to do a construction project. So when our board looked at this and said, you're going to take it to this level, how much more is this going to cost us now? Is it 50%? Is it 100%? What are you doing to me?
Okay.
Do we have to dance? All right. Just
right.
let us know. Give us the high.
So a unique thing happened. If you recall, we actually bid it out both ways, okay? So we put out the multiple primes, and at the same time, we put out a GC package with the three mechanical primes. This was a great test. It turned out that the multiple primes, okay, the expanded multiple prime came in over 10% cheaper than the general contractor with the three mechanical primes. And so if we went back to that original slide, we had a project budget of $27 million, and that final project cost actually came in just under $24 million. Pretty uncommon, okay, for any public sector project in New York State. All right, so there were some best practices that we started thinking about that, and when we actually moved forward with additional projects after that with that same delivery system, okay, based on our experience. And each of those other projects had similar success, all right? So we made a decision to bypass the general contractor, okay, model. We brought in a construction manager. I was the construction manager at that time as agent. I was hired basically as a professional service, okay, the same time that the AE team was hired, right? But me being hired as agent, all right, I still did not have a contractual relationship with each of those entities. All right, all the trade contractors, they actually ended up having direct contract relationships with Nassau BOCES, but we were written into the contract to coordinate the work. Right.
And I will recall the analysis that we did of the construction management proposals that we got back. And our architect sat down with us and said, these are the ones that are going to give you nice, pretty reports and timely responses. And this is the guy who's going to roll up his sleeves and actually stand there in the building and swing wrenches with the folks that can make sure that this work gets done. And because of where our heads were at the time, that was why we chose Frank's firm.
So just a couple of practices that were initiated at the time. Number one, money flows. That's what gets people's attention, okay, and especially in public works in the New York metropolitan area, where sometimes it's not uncommon for people to wait 90 days for that, first payment. We were making sure that people were paid in 30 days or less, right? We bought a 6-day work schedule, okay, into the original contract, but I can tell you, we worked many a Sunday. And many a Sunday I showed up on that site, but we had these people so engaged that there wasn't a single claim for overtime, okay, during that time. So sustained visible leadership.
Think about that. Just think about that. We had people working overtime on Sundays and did not get overtime claims. And why was that? Go ahead to the next bullet.
No. Okay. Yeah. Sustained visible leadership. I mean, we were out there. We were the cheerleaders, okay? We got people convinced that they were actually involved with something that was bigger than themselves, all right? It got to a point, it became a challenge. We were putting 200,000 square feet of space into place in 9 months, all right? I can't tell you how many people are saying that it couldn't be done, okay? But you get everybody challenged, you get everybody engaged, you provide them with direction and so forth, and you're in the trenches with them, all right? You'd be surprised what people can do, all right? The other thing that goes hand in hand with the leadership is ethical behavior, all right? So we treated everybody fairly, all right? If I gave a field directive to do some work, they understood that they were going to be treated fairly in terms of when they finally came back with pricing if we had to fast track something to get something done, all right? And that was I was only able to do that because of this man right here, all right? John Shea, basically, he went out on the line for everybody to assure that everyone was going to be treated correctly. Right? Not common practice, again, from where we've been in the past. Right? Okay, I'm trying. All right, USTA. This is a second project that got us thinking about this this whole concept. So if you're familiar with the USTA, US Open, all right, late August, big event in New York City, all right? USTA had been a long-term client of mine, and at the time, they had approached me about kicking off this first project for the $500 million program that they're still in the middle of. So if you're familiar with New York, you know that we've put a retractable roof, okay, on Arthur Ashe Stadium. They're in the midst now of building a new Armstrong Stadium. And I was given the first project, okay, to build the West Campus tournament facility. And the reason this became so important is that ESPN had just inked a new contract with them. CBS was out. All right, Dan Zausner, the CEO of the tennis center, came to me and said, listen, they want new broadcast booths, they want new tournament courts, okay, they want a new practice facility, transportation building for the players and so forth, and you got 5 months to build it. All right? So how do you get that done? Not a tremendously large project, but it's still planning, design, $25 million worth of work, all right, not an easy deal. That means everybody has to be on board, okay? There was, you talk about mission critical. I actually, in the contract that I had with the USTA, I had to have the consequential damages written out of that contract because I was so afraid of possible failure, they would have taken our company under, okay? Because the flow down from ESPN, okay, not getting their broadcast, and that first round of the USTA, of the US Open not coming off on TV was, just an incredible amount of pressure. What people don't know is that there are 17 tournament courts at the National Tennis Facility. All 17 of those courts are in operation, okay, for the first week of the US Open. One court not being there just puts the schedule into a complete mess. Right? So to give you an idea here, May 15th, we broke ground March 31st, 2014 for this. We're actually sitting on the old 1964 and 1939 World's Fair footings. There's a couple of things going on there. All right? August 21st. And you're seeing half the program here, right? So, what did we do? First of all, immediate focus on high-risk events, all right? Can't worry about everything, but you have to worry about the things that can actually impact you in a negative way, all right? All right? Early engagement in the project till even delivered. All right, so we chose to go construction management at risk. Okay, remember, this is a private sector project. The project John was just describing is a public sector project. All right, so we have the ability to fast track the project. What is it? Anybody know what fast track means, or does everyone know what fast track means? All right, so here we are. We're building foundations while we're still designing a structural steel for the grandstands. All right, all right. Previous working relationships amongst project stakeholders. Everyone that worked on this project, every vendor, had a long-term relationship with the USTA. We had to have it. We had to have people that knew that facility, knew the utilities and so forth that was going on, knew how to deal with the agencies. All right? Transparent and open communication between the CM and the trades. Again, same situation that we had over at Nassau BOCES. We're visible. We're on that site every day. We're giving people direction. They have to have a trust in that direction. Let's see. One real important thing, okay, right here. All right, incentivize the process. There was a time where we probably in the middle of the summer we had 300 people, okay, on that job site. Not a big job site. Think of the congestion and so forth. And at the same time, we're driving piles and footings, okay, for the foundations for the retractable roof at Ash. So a ton of stuff going on. We had to have people's attention on this. We had to make sure the manpower and resources are going to be available. Did something very unusual, not even easy for a private sector owner, biweekly requisition payment. Okay, we were paying people in 2 weeks. Right? How do you get people's attention? Well, New York City, a lot of construction going on, okay, over the last 5 years. Right? For us to have the resources, people getting paid, they knew where the money was going to be. So this sense of urgency, clearly understood project goals, things are, we had everybody basically aligned and moving in the same direction. Right? So those two projects really kind of underpinned our thinking. And like I said, when I decided to go back and finish a PhD, okay, I was thinking in my mind from day one, look, there probably is this ideal state of project delivery. And those two projects always stuck in my mind in terms of identifying the initial, what I'll call critical stakeholder alignment factors that, okay, are needed to make that work. So the research basically tells a story. So here's an interesting thing. We went out, State University Construction Fund became our research partner. The fund is basically responsible in New York State for most of the construction at the university level, the SUNY campuses. Right? Probably one of the largest public owners that we have. Okay. Just an interesting tidbit. They were the third public agency I actually had approached. Okay, I had approached New York City SCA, okay, about doing this. In fact, John had arranged that initial meeting with the SCA's leadership. The results of that was a very nice 1-hour conversation, and then they told me, "Thank you, don't ever come back. Have a nice life." Pretty much. Yeah.
It wasn't personal. It was the politics that somebody would think that the data that they would release would somehow reflect poorly enough that it would affect their ability to continue to work going forward. It was a business decision and a risk decision that they made not to share the data.
And they weren't the only agency. The next agency, okay, New York City Department of Design and Construction. Huge agency, okay? They basically touch almost everything that's going on in New York City. The commissioner, who actually came out of Columbia, had an academic background, basically said to me, all right, I can't have my project managers even thinking about the kind of questions you're asking. Have a very nice life. Thankfully, I had a relationship with Carissa Marcello, Director of Design and Construction over at the fund. I sit on the board AGC, New York State. So we had met a number of times over the years and had these kinds of discussions. He was willing to look under the hood. And that's what you need. You know, you got to have someone willing to participate. All right. So SUCF, they gave us a database of 180 projects across the state of New York. These were all major projects. They were academic facilities, classrooms, student centers, athletic facilities, and so forth. So a robust database. What they had complete data for was basically cost. All right? Forget about schedule, forget about quality, so but they had the data for cost. And that was fine with us, right? And we were able to, those initial 180 projects, identify the 20 best performing and the 20 worst performing in cost growth. And of those 40 projects, okay, they were able to pull the project data for 32 and the archives for 32 other projects in which project managers were actually still working for the fund. And we created a survey, 108 questions. Can you imagine filling out a survey, 108 questions about your project? Not easy, but these guys did it because it was their job, and Marcel asked them to do it. We captured a tremendous amount of data. All right. Now, what was unique also about this was part of my dissertation. The kind of questions I asked about ethics, leadership, operations, so forth, a kid 3 years out of school going for a PhD would have never been able to do it, right? But, you know, playing in the sandbox for 35 years, I had my own perspective, okay, and certain things that I thought we should be diving into. And you know what? Marcel was on board, and we captured a tremendous amount of data. Right? So, what did we find? Highly successful projects. Oh, just one final point. The project managers, when they were filling out the surveys, they didn't know if their project was highly successful or challenged. They didn't know if they had a good one or a bad one. It was just their project. So you're getting their perspective, their own biases, and so forth, and that's what we wanted to capture. Highly successful projects. There was an alignment of project interests with stakeholder interests. Project goals and objectives clearly defined. The experience, okay, of the team members was on the high end, all right? Straightforward communications, visible leadership, okay? And in the end, we had minimal cost growth and change orders. And that's important to understand. I'll go circle back to that in a second, right? Significantly challenged projects, okay? Early team, okay? Problems with integration of those team members. You can see from the data. Contractor didn't like the architect didn't like the contractor. The owner, they don't like anybody, all right? So that, and I have something to speak to that, all right? Different project goals and objectives, unethical behavior, company experience levels low, all right? So all of a sudden you got these projects that kind of running amok, okay? And I'm sure it wasn't just about cost growth. I'm sure, you know, there was a correlation with schedule, quality, and so forth. All those three performance incomes. This is the one that actually captured, you know, my imagination. With every project, the SUCF PMs always felt their performance was satisfactory while the other team members were falling short. So they're saying, hey, we're doing a great job. I asked them a question about leadership, ethics, payment stuff. They were always doing the right thing, all right? The architect was always kind of okay, and the constructor was always the dog, right? Can you imagine being a constructor on a kickoff meeting and you got that, you know, the PM for the fund has already got that in the head, right? Again, about perspective, about biases and so forth. And I can tell you, and John knows, there's probably nobody worse than me when I walk into a kickoff meeting and say, hey, I know this architect for 10 years, man. This guy ain't getting it done, right?
It led to a lot of amusing morning meetings at 7 o'clock, I'll tell you that.
That's it. So, you know, we're all guilty of that, okay? And then this really, again, it got us to thinking about, you know, there has to be a different way, okay? Before a shovel gets in the ground, to make everyone aware, okay, of these personal biases, right? We lost it all. Okay, now we're back. All right, let's see what happened. Anyway, at the same time, because we have this concept of triangulation in research, all right, we went out with the identical survey in the industry, okay, the local New York City metropolitan area. Guess what? We were finding a lot of the same things. To some extent, some of the means and so forth, the data were almost identical. So this wasn't unique to the fund. This seems to be, you know, problematic, you know, throughout our industry, at least in New York. All right? Okay, so keep moving. Introducing rapid alignment initiated delivery. This is where we ended up. This is our best value alignment system. And we're going to go through this framework a little bit tonight. I know we're going to be running out of time, but we want to try something a little bit different, okay? But this is the model, okay? 6 key elements, and within these key elements, there are, I'm going to say, 19 critical stakeholder alignment factors. And as John alluded to before, some of them being trust, okay, accountability, okay, sense of urgency, communications, and so forth. You know, these are all terms that you've heard, you know, throughout your careers. But now, what we're finding that those 6 elements, ethical behavior, equitable risk allocation, clearly defined objectives, sustainable leadership, relationships, integrated teams, competencies, capabilities, these are all interdependent on one another, right? That's what has been opening our eyes. So, project team interests are put in front of individual stakeholder interests. Doesn't mean that stakeholder interests aren't addressed, but they're aligned. Right? Risk management, strategic planning, okay, for project delivery, okay. We use this now as a map, and we're actually introducing this on a couple of our projects at the DeMatteis Organizations that we're currently constructing. Okay, time for a little fun. Hopefully the technology works, all right? Everyone get a chance to kind of look at this little team steps? I got a quick question. How many of you are actually responsible for building construction projects, okay, within your organizations? John, you told me that they didn't do construction.
I never said that.
They all do construction.
I think I'm the only one who doesn't.
Okay. All right. So we got this little case study. And in a synopsis here, there's a firehouse, public sector, okay, on Long Island, under construction. We have this parapet wall condition. And one day, the CM basically walks on a job site. The parapet is being constructed, but the parapet is being constructed without that reinforcing steel. It's just being laid on a steel beam. So the CM stops the work, all right, and basically says, listen, something doesn't look right here. Think about it, fellas. We put this parapet up, either we're going to have cracking 5-10 years from now, or something worse could happen, and this parapet's going to fall down, fall on somebody, kill somebody, and you know, we're all in a world of hurt. Right? Let's get something done here. They go out to the architect issues a new sketch and says, you're right, we should have reinforcing steel in here, and they issued a sketch for the rebar to be welded around the entire top flange of the perimeter. Then all of a sudden, something unfolds. Right? We have a situation here where the CM negotiates a $25,000 change order with the steel contractor, determines its fair value, okay, has the steel contractor proceed with the work. That gets done, the masonry contractor comes back on site, builds the parapet wall, everyone is satisfied with the work, okay, the bill is put into the project owner, okay, for payment to the steel contractor. The architect comes back and says, I'm not signing off on that change order, okay? That should have been the mason's responsibility, and you know what? We're not taking responsibility for it, and we're actually recommending to the project owner it's not going to be paid, not to pay it. Right?
Anybody ever have something like that happen on a construction project?
Now, understand, design, bid, build, public works. That's what this is, a public, municipality, a fire district. All right. You're representing it with design, bid, build, 100% documents. All right. So if I'm the contractor, I'm bidding a set of documents. If that rebar's not shown, you didn't buy that rebar. It's as simple as that. Okay. You are representing, your architect and engineer representing these 100% documents. Okay? If, in my mind, you know, if the mason and the general contractor have to start anticipating what you think your design intent is, okay, then we're going down a path which is very
So let's
tough.
see what they think.
Okay, so we're going to throw a couple of questions on you, and we're going to see what you think. All right? All right, first thing, take your phones out. Hopefully this works so we don't have to just raise hands. All right? All right, so you're going to put a new text message into 22333, and then as a message, you're going to enter in Frank DarConte 977. And if we do that correctly, and if we're making the connection between, okay, the software and the Poll Everywhere vendor, there'll be a message that'll come up on your phone in probably a minute saying you're connected. Has anybody been connected yet? Okay, we got one, so that's okay. The rest of you, you're like me, you can't handle the technology, then. Right? Anyone else? Okay, we got,
Yeah,
okay,
it's 9 o'clock.
okay, so it's starting to come around. Now we got a bunch of hands. All right, so let's start. First question. Okay, assuming everyone has read the case study, all right? So did the project manager for the construction manager make the correct decision to stop the work? Really basic question. Yes or no? Technology is on.
All right, do it by show of hands for now.
Okay. Should have been coming up. Not coming up. All right. What do we think? Yes? All right.
Next question.
Disappointed. Okay.
Don't be.
All right. Next question. Which best describes the purpose of the sketch, that SK1 sketch that's in front of you that was issued by the architect? You think it's a clarification sketch, or do you think it's documentation that was omitted from the original bid documents? Who thinks A? Who thinks it was just a clarification sketch? Yeah, I can tell you that the specs were generic spec, and the spec will say, as any typical spec, the mason contractor shall provide all horizontal and vertical reinforcing. All right. But here, you know, we issued a specific detail. Okay. B, documentation. Okay, that's my opinion. Okay, the documentation was omitted from the original bid documents. Right? All right. Okay, so the situation, now we start getting kind of into the dirt a little bit. The situation was most likely caused by a lack of leadership and ethic behavior by who? Who do you think is most responsible for not doing the right thing here?
Show of hands for the architect.
Okay. Show the hands for the project owner.
Good, nobody blames the owner. I like that answer.
How about the construction manager?
Got a construction man, couple
Got
of
a couple
construction managers.
couple of construction managers. How about the mason or the steel contractor? How about the masonry contractor? Anybody think it's its fault? We got one. We got one in the front row. All right. Okay. I'll give you my opinion on this. Okay. First of all, steel contractor. Okay, we directed to do the work. Steel contractor would never be, in my opinion, installing welding reinforcement bar if something's not shown on a set of drawings. Right? The architect definitely tried to lay it off on the masonry contractor, saying, "Hey, look, the specification says you're responsible for vertical reinforcement." All right. That's all well and good. Okay, so you're standing up a wall, and the specification is calling, for you put vertical bars. Okay, as you're standing up a wall, and you got your horizontal reinforcing every couple of courses. Yeah, that's pretty standard practice. Here's the nuance: you're welding. First of all, union trades. public works, prevailing wage, and you're welding steel to steel. All right? That's the nuance. So either that was going to be the steel, that was always going to be the steel contractor's work. Okay, it was never going to be the mason's work. All right?
Well, what are we saying here? We're saying that it's not so cut and dried. Even though there's most hands went up for the architect, there's still cases to be made for everybody else. These are not easy questions to answer.
Okay.
Could the subcontractor pick it up over the bid process?
So I'm sure that every one of those masonry subcontractors had in their mind, okay, when they were bidding that job, saying, hey, the architect's not showing any vertical bars here. What are they
I'm not
out here,
bidding it.
okay? Okay.
Because if I bid it, but this guy doesn't bid it, and he wins the bid, and he gets a change order out of it, I'm going by the drawings.
And
So what are we talking about here? This whole concept is to get past that, is to get everybody to start thinking about, hey, I have a responsibility. I might not own it, but I have a responsibility to bring this up. And if you get the project team all aligned, pulling in the same direction, those things will come up. And then we don't have these conversations.
the other issue here is that this is what's problematic with design, bid, build. All right? Again, another term, over-the-wall construction. Here's a completed, look, that district is representing that they have 100% documents, okay, to go out to bid.
Anybody ever get a set of 100% documents from an architect? Anybody?
And you know
Bueller?
what? I'm doing this, 35 years, almost 40 years. I don't even have that expectation, okay? And John will know, when we represented him, okay, in the past, I said, John, as much as your A team says they're going to give you 100% documents, let's sit back, okay? We're going to have, we'll build our 5% contingency or whatever, and we'll tighten that up after. But there was, when you don't have that opportunity, especially as a general contractor. So I work for a general contractor in New York City, where we probably have close to $500 million worth of New York City SCA work under construction right now. I can tell you, there's 7 guys in our estimating department. No one, okay, is saying, hey, I think that architect missed that rebar, okay? Let's put $25,000 into our bid to make sure it's covered.
So let's get to the next question,
Okay.
which is slightly different, and go back to 4,
Okay, on the cost.
but a lot trickier.
Okay.
Who's got to spend the money? How many think it's the owner? How many think that you're going to pay it regardless? No matter who's at fault, we're going to pay the bill.
I think so.
How many think it should be the architect? We all said that it's the architect. Who thinks the architect should cut that check?
I don't think
Try
so.
getting it.
Okay, so let me answer that. If you read the case study, and I'm intimately, familiar with this, the owner got fair value for that $25,000. Okay, had that rebar, okay, been well, shown on the original documents, it would have cost that owner $25,000. That would have been in the original bid. So from day one, okay, it wasn't a situation where the owner was overpaying for something or whatever, okay? The steel contractor acted honorably. The masonry contractor actually pulled their crew off, demobilized, went back, remobilized, then charged the owner a dime, all right? My opinion, the owner owns it, okay? Look, as an owner, at some point we have to kind of accept that, look, once in a while somebody's going to miss something. Hopefully when you're pulling your original budgets together and so forth, you're building some form of contingencies in there. There's nobody perfect out there. All right?
And before we get to the next one, I just want to talk about F, because I think that happens more than we'd like, when everybody just says, you know what, we got to move on. You take 5, you take 5, you take 5, and we get it done just to get it over with.
I can tell you, go ahead, question.
Well, I think when you look at errors and omissions, when you evaluate these types of things, there is a premium cost for change order. We all know that. So when you're looking at, is it an omission or is it an error on the plan? This was clearly an omission, so the owner did not get value for it, so it makes sense that the owner would pay. But when you're looking at the difference between a low competitive bid versus a change order, there is a variance. So I just wanted to
No, and that's a good point. Let's face it. you know, when you're grinding numbers, okay, and I sit up in that estimating department, and you're on bid day, and all of a sudden, you know, you're with those trade contractors, and numbers are coming in. That is the time, okay, where you're trying to get your best and you know, best and last number out of those trade contractors.
The other observation is, yeah, you don't want to pick off your architect or your contractors and back to your stakeholder, keeping that team integrated and feeling good about the project. So, but to track that kind of stuff, and I always put the contingencies or even allowance, depending on my team's or my review of the complexity of the project. Because, like I said, it can't be 100% perfect plans, right? So looking at the complexity and all the variances, the timeline, if there's critical timeline, I think it's good practice if you're allowed to, based on the state you're in, to put an allowance in to cover some of those things, because to be fair to everyone, the contractor, the owner, the architect, understanding it's not a perfect world, I think that that's a strategy that works and it kind of leads into all the things that you said prior to that.
Go ahead.
It seems like we've kind of neglected the construction manager, and it seems to me that they have fiduciary responsibility to coordinate between the trade contractors. My opinion is I've had my contracts written, so the construction manager has some flexibility. I had a situation that was similar to this. The CM paid for the whole thing. I didn't see a bill, not an owner. So I like that kind of accountability and that kind of organic that you have people who take responsibility for their oversight. And sometimes it's the architect. I have no problem picking the architect if it's necessary. But I mean, they get a lot of kicks, and sometimes.
I have a question for you. Was your CM brought on from day one, and it was actually involved with the constructability analysis with the documents?
Yes,
Right, so this is a little bit different because this construction manager was brought on after the bid took place.
But you're kind of proving the point.
But yeah, I get your point. I get your point, but you know what, even as a construction manager, that CM was working as agent or for you, not at risk. Right, so.
Don't get defensive, Frank.
Don't.
Well, from a construction manager's point of view, that would be hard to pick up on the constructability review if they're not in there.
Look, it's a nuanced detail, all right, but I would argue that that's an important enough detail that the CM, okay, probably should have picked it up, okay, or at least if you were doing a true constructability review between the CM and the AE, all right, that there's a good chance that would have been picked up, all right?
Oh, we got one question left. We got 3
Okay,
minutes.
all right, 3 minutes? We got 2 questions left.
2 questions?
Yeah, maybe even. Okay, so what issue is the most problematic in this case study? Significant delay to the project schedule, significant damage to the reputation of the construction manager, okay, for failure to recognize a deficiency, going back to the point over here, potential damage to the delivery team relationships, causing long-term friction throughout the remainder project, or the situation described is not really a problem. We deal with this day in and day out, and who really cares? What do you think? Who thinks, I don't think it's A, because I think it got resolved
Somebody
fairly
paid.
quickly, right. Who thinks it's B? No, nobody. How about C? I think it's C, all right? D? We got any Ds? All right. I could tell you in real life, significant damage to that team where that construction manager had a close relationship, okay, with that project architect, and after that relationship actually went south, okay? They never got that relationship basically healed after this. Okay, we're closer. All right, John, this is you, baby.
Sure. So this kind of gets back to what we were talking about over here. It's a different question than who should pay, but it's who's most responsible. Who should have picked that up? Who should have said something before it became an issue where somebody actually had to cut a check? Owner? Architect? CM? I hear yes. Yeah, raise your hands.
So I'm not so sure how that contract's written. And I'm not getting
But you're gonna wanna
defensive,
see it.
Okay. But historically, when I've worked as a CM as agent, all right, there's been pretty clear understanding between me and the project owner, and this is a discussion I've had, okay? And honestly, so I said, listen, I'm your representative. If I do great, that's all well. If I screw up, it's still your problem. All right? Because in the end, I'm an extension. How many times I said, I'm an extension of your facilities management staff. All right? So in the end, I'm just cautioning everybody, probably the way the contracts are actually written and so forth, the owner probably still owns it. Now, that you have the ability to get your CM to basically eat that, because let's say there's a long-term relationship, you got other work coming down the line, okay, that's something that you can do when you have relationships, right?
All right, let's wrap this
Okay.
up for quick Q&A.
All right. Final question. All right. I don't even know if we can go here with this.
Probably not.
All
We
right.
didn't get into it.
Okay, so I'm skipping all of this because we're running long. But in the end, all right, here's some recommendations. Wherever possible, we found form the team as early as possible. Focus on high-risk events. Understand stakeholder interests. We don't tend to talk to each other enough about what identify the team leadership, open communication, and understand that these SAPes here, they're independent of one another. For example, if you don't have ethical behavior, you can't have sustained leadership, all right? If I can't build trust and so forth, there's no way I'm leading that team, all right? And it all falls in one with each other.
So to kind of wrap this up, I would be surprised if any of you were surprised at any of the results and the results of the data and the research that was done. I think all of it, we all inherently understand. What I am excited about and what I use this for is to figure out where to put my focus when you're doing, whether it's a construction project or a maintenance project or any other project. Where should be the focus? Should the focus be, well, I need to get a better contracts lawyer to sit me down and go through the documents and that 2-foot pile of paper that Frank was talking about earlier and say, all right, this is this person's responsibility and it adds up to this much and I need accountants to figure that out? Or should the focus be on the team, on the people? How do we get these people working in the same direction? And what are the things that we can do to create the situation of trust so that we can have a successful project outcome?
All right. The idea, be true to the work. I've been preaching that to him for for the 25 years now. Okay. Go ahead. Okay. Stakeholder alignment, proposition elements. And I skipped over those slides just because
We'll have the
of time.
presentation available
Right,
for
but
everybody
it'll
so
be
you can
posted.
see the detail
All right.
behind it.
Okay. And we're done. And those are my granddaughters. All right. Thank you.
So I know we're standing between you and the bar, but does anybody have any other comments or questions? We got a couple of minutes. Sir.
I have a quick one.
Sure.
All the things that you mentioned were really great, that most of us probably would be sustained, visible leadership and keeping the money flowing, ethical behavior, all that kind of stuff. But how about performance bonuses in the private sector? You talked about that. Typically we have liquidated damages. Is that ever a strategy? I know half of my career has been in the public, half of my career has been in the private.
So let me comment on the USTA project. All right. So we did not write any liquidated damages. Okay. Frankly, I'm not a personal believer of liquidated damages. Okay. I actually use it to our advantage because you just told me that you're creating a cap for me, so at least I understand what the cap is. All right. And usually it works to my advantage because if I'm bidding against people that really don't understand how LDs work, all right, then I'm still going to be more competitive because now they're building up, they're putting money in their bid for possible future claims and damages. So for most clients, I would recommend don't use LDs. Now public sector in New York, we don't see too much in the way of performance bonuses. Okay, Private sector, it's about long-term relationships. That's what I've seen. All right. So you do the work, get paid. Here's what I always tell any potential client: all I'm looking for is a fair and reasonable fee for the level of services I'm providing. All right. And frankly, if you're running a firm where 80% of your business is repeat clientele, that's the deal. Okay, to have that continued relationship. You're paying me to do a job. Okay, I'm going to go there and we're going to do the right thing for you. I just had this at the USTA where they had a shared savings clause. Okay, and in the initial proposal, I'm like, I told Danny Zausner at the time, I said, look, you're going out for this RFP. Are you kidding me? I said, you don't need to do that. Okay, I'm supposed to be working as hard as I can to give you that best pricing from day one. All right? You want to give me a bonus to do my job? I said, all you're going to do is invite people basically to inflate their budgets. Okay? To me, it's not a good practice. Go ahead.
Actually, there's a built-in bonus if this work that you're studying and the job. We come in faster, and every day that comes in faster, you are shrinking your overhead and other costs. So we've actually I've been involved in projects where they take an 18-month project, made it a 10-month project, and they got all the trades together and say, guys, if we can pull this off, and all we're like, yes, let's do it. So there's kind of a built-in bonus right there.
And the discussion I've had with Chris Marcella, because we're developing for him right now an online assessment tool, a diagnostic tool. We said, look, Chris, we really kind of got this out here. Your data is already telling us that where these stakeholder alignment factors, okay, what we call proposition elements, were in existence, you had minimal cost growth. So if we implement this, what do you think that rate of return is on a $30 million job? Okay, if I have, let's say 1% change order growth versus 6% change order growth, it's huge, right? So look, we're building theory. Okay, we've outlined a process. It's going to take us another 20 projects with them, okay, to just keep documenting, collecting the data and so forth, all right, to see where this is long term. But right now, everybody's in a go mode with it, and we actually think it's an exciting opportunity to change the conversation in New York State. All right?
Thank you, guys.
How do you determine the fair market value of the
Okay. How I determine it, okay, many times I will just go out to, let's say, other trade contractors that we're dealing with, and I'll ask them to price the change order. That's the easiest way for me to do that. Yeah, our estimating department, yeah, we have a pretty good idea what it should cost, and frankly, we're a hard bid, pretty much a hard bid general contractor in New York City. If you don't know numbers, you can't survive. We're a 100-year-old firm. All right, so you have to, 30 years ago, somebody told me, so I asked, well, what's the most important thing you have to know about to survive in this business? They said, you have to know what things cost. All right?
But if you think about the model, what is fair value? Fair value is when everybody agrees that that's the number. So if you can have the conversation and not have people coming at it from their own perspectives, but to say, yeah, this we all agree. That's sure, absolutely.
Now, so here's another thing I tell you, especially when you're doing public works in New York City. Okay, it's a tough place to survive. We always say, please do us a favor, don't give us any change order work. Okay, you'd be surprised. You think somebody's making money? You're not making money. At least in the sand pit that I'm playing in. Right? It's a very tough deal. It's not an easy deal. So that is a bit of a misconception. All right. Now, there's no doubt there are contractors out there, and this is the problem with design, bid, build, see, build. They're going to lowball a number. How many times they tell you in our career there's no free lunch? Right? Everybody thinks I can't tell you how
Usually
many
around 12 o'clock.
How many business superintendents we talk to, they think, okay, all of a sudden, this is interesting. You got 7 bids come in, okay? the project budget was $15 million, right? And I've got, 4 guys, in the, between 14 and 16 million, they're in a range. And I got that one knucklehead that's all of a sudden at, 9.5 million, okay? And I'm giving them, 24 hours to withdraw the bid. I'm not going to take your bid bond. And they're saying, no, I can do this. And then what's the worst thing? I got the business superintendent say, come on, get him on board. He can do this. And I'm saying, it's not enough aspirin in that bottle, for me to drag this guy, through this next year, to try to get this bill. I said, you're going to find yourself dealing with the bonding company, and we're going to be doing a workout, right? And you can't believe in this day and age that, you're having that conversation. So what do? I'm making a phone call to the bonding company saying, listen, you issued this bond, you got a problem, right? You have to know what things cost. And,
Anything else before I one last comment? What was the question?
Recovering
costs?
Recovering I don't think we ever chase. We generally don't chase architects and engineers for errors and omissions.
I mean, we talk about it, and we just know it's going down a bad road, and it's not worth our time. We have buildings to build.
So what's happening? That AE team is basically not being rehired for the next one. Okay, I think it's very rare that listen, we're not talking about the Hyatt hotel collapse. All right, we're talking about an omission in a detail. Okay, in the normal course of doing business that can be remedied. I think though, from an owner's perspective, you have to basically evaluate and say, where's my budget? Am I still within budget? Okay, am I getting fair value for that change order? And you make a business decision, because it is about relationships.
All right,
Oh.
one last one, and then we're done.
All right, one last question, guys.
Go ahead.
What's been your experience with architects when they end up, their design ends up costing you money that is not value added to the project? Say they make a design error and you catch it after the fact and you have to tear out a bunch of work and you have to, then the owner's paying more money than they normally would. What's been your success rate in trying to get money back from the architect for those issues?
Not well. Similar question over here. It's the architect's kind of insulated from it in the grand scheme of things. It's just not going to happen in reality. Yeah, that's right. All right. Well, I appreciate everybody coming out here for the first session. I know that's always a tough one to get through, but we're here through Tuesday. So if anybody wants to chat about it some more, got any more questions or comments, please, we're around.
We actually do love talking about this stuff. We've been thinking about
Which
it
is
a long
sad,
time.
but
Yeah,
it
it's
is
like
what
get
it
a
is.
life.
Thanks so much, guys, and we can talk plenty more about it right upstairs with some drinks, so thank you.